Picture a blackened, half-melted crown sitting in the ashes of a ruined Rome, stamped with the seal of the Great Khan. If a single heart in Karakoram hadn't stopped beating in December 1241, this terrifying image wouldn't be a thought experiment, it would be our history. It leads us to one chilling, unanswered question that hangs over the entire medieval world. Could the fractured, feudal kingdoms of Western Europe have actually survived the most ruthless military machine the world had ever seen, or was their entire civilization destined to be erased from the map? To understand how close we came to the edge, you have to look at Europe in the spring of 1241. It was a continent completely divided. The Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor were locked in a bitter, petty civil war, utterly ignoring the smoke rising from the east. When the Mongol generals Subutai and Ögedei Khan swept through Poland and Hungary, wiping out two massive Christian armies in a single week, Europe panicked. But then, they breathed a sigh of relief. The Mongol vanguard suddenly turned back. Why? Because Ögedei Khan had died, and by law, the princes had to return east to elect a new leader. But what if that law didn't matter? What if Subutai, smelling blood, chose conquest over politics and kept marching west? Before we watch the armies clash, let me ask you, if you were a peasant in 1241, who would you fear more, the ruthless, highly organized Mongol horse archers, or the heavily armored European knights who routinely trampled their own people? Let me know in the comments. The immediate hope for the West lay in their ultimate defense, stone. Europe was a landscape of castles, thousands of them, designed to starve out invaders. The kings of Germany and France believed these fortresses were impregnable. They were wrong. The Mongols didn't just bypass Europe's castles, they turned them into ovens. Imagine standing on a stone battlement, looking out at an army that doesn't just want to fight you, but has spent the last 30 years mastering the art of the siege in China. The air fills with the smell of burning sulfur. Giant catapults, engineered by captured Chinese specialists, begin throwing pots of terrifying gunpowder and flaming naphtha over your walls. The stone doesn't fall, but the heat inside becomes unbearable. Knights are literally roasted alive inside their own armor. But then, a glimmer of hope. The dense, dark forests of Germany offer a natural defense. The heavy German cavalry, led by King Conrad, manages to lure a Mongol raiding party into a narrow valley. For a moment, Christian swords cut deep. The invulnerable horde looks mortal. Conrad believes he has found the formula to beat them. But this small victory is exactly what Subutai wanted. The retreat was a trap. As the Germans celebrate, the Mongols set fire to the surrounding dry pine forests. The wind carries the choking smoke directly into the German lines. Blinded, coughing, and terrified, the knights are systematically picked off by archers who can shoot a bird out of the sky from horseback. The German defense collapses in a single afternoon. The road to France is wide open. Now, the stakes scale up from local lords to the survival of empires. By the winter of 1242, the horde reaches the banks of the Rhine. King Louis IX of France, a man so pious they would later call him a saint, realizes that no single kingdom can stand alone. He does the impossible, he unites the warring barons of France and England under one banner. It is a grand coalition of chivalry, a sea of shining armor and flying pennants, gathered on the plains of Champagne. This is the moment. The peak of Western military power against the unstoppable tide of the East. The battle begins with a thunderous charge. The French knights, desperate in fighting for their faith, smash into the Mongol center with unbelievable force. The Mongol lines buckle. They break. The knights shout in triumph, chasing the fleeing horsemen across the plain, convinced they have saved Christendom. But as the dust clears, the French realize they have run their horses to the point of collapse, miles away from their infantry support.
Indeed, a fascinating representation.
And from the tree line on either side, the real Mongol army emerges. It was all a lie. The classic feigned retreat, executed on a continental scale. Which brings us to the ultimate crisis. With the French army shattered, Paris falls, and the road to Rome is clear. But here is where the story gets truly strange. What if the greatest threat to the Mongol conquest wasn't the European knights at all, but something far more microscopic? We are about to look at the horrifying turning point in Italy, and wait until you see what happens when Subutai's horde reaches the gates of Rome itself. The Mongol war machine didn't care about the sanctity of Rome. It cared about pasture. As Subutai's scouts rode down the Italian peninsula, the eternal city trembled, its bells ringing out in a frantic, endless alarm. Pope Gregory IX barricaded himself inside the Lateran Palace, praying for a miracle. And for a moment, it seemed his prayers were answered. Italy possessed a silent, invisible defender that no medieval army could conquer, the Campagna marshes. These stagnant, mosquito-infested wetlands surrounded Rome like a toxic moat. The Mongol warriors, born and bred on the dry, windswept steppes of Central Asia, had no immunity to the deadly Roman fever, malaria. Within weeks of setting up camp, thousands of horsemen were shivering with violent chills, their joints burning with fever. Worse, the damp, swampy ground began to rot the hooves of their legendary horses. The unstoppable horde was literally melting away in the Italian heat. Europe held its breath. Had the elements themselves saved the heart of the Christian world? It was a beautiful hope. But Subutai was a man who traded in brutality, not mercy. If his men could not scale the walls of Rome, he would make the Romans come to him. The Mongol engineers constructed massive, counterweight trebuchets just beyond the reach of the city's archers. But they didn't load them with stones. They loaded them with the bloated, plague-ridden corpses of their own fallen soldiers and horses, launching them high over the ancient Roman walls. The air inside Rome quickly turned toxic. Within days, the pestilence spread through the crowded streets like wildfire. This wasn't just a siege, it was a biological countdown. The Pope realized that to stay inside was to die. In a desperate, final bid for survival, the gates of Rome swung open. Not to fight, but to surrender. But here is where the story takes a truly chilling turn. You might think this is the end of Europe, a desolate, abandoned wasteland ruled forever by foreign horse lords. But what if the fall of Rome was actually the trigger for something far more terrifying? Wait until you see what happens in our final chapter, when we reveal the secret legacy this conquest left behind. But first, let me ask you, if the Pope was forced to bend the knee to a pagan Khan, do you think Islam or a completely new, hybrid faith would have swept across the remnants of Europe? Tell me what you think in the comments below. With the church shattered, a strange, suffocating silence fell over the continent. The war was over. The Great Khan's peace, the Pax Mongolica, now stretched unbroken from the shores of the Atlantic all the way to the Sea of Japan. At first, it looked like a bizarre golden age. With the feudal lords dead or subjugated, the constant, bloody warfare of medieval Europe stopped overnight. The Mongols rebuilt the old Roman roads, connecting them to the Silk Road. For the first time in history, a merchant could travel from Paris to Beijing with a golden tablet of safe passage hanging from their neck. Chinese printing presses, gunpowder, and medical secrets flooded into the universities of Oxford and Paris. Europe was wealthier, safer, and more technologically advanced than it had ever been. It felt like a total resolution to centuries of Dark Age misery. But this prosperity was a trap. In the 1340s, a highly contagious, deadly flea-borne pathogen emerged from the deep steppes of Asia. In our timeline, we called it the Black Death, and it took decades to slowly trickle into Europe via slow-moving trade ships. But in this unified world, the disease didn't trickle. It flew. It traveled along the hyper-efficient, lightning-fast Mongol postal courier network. The very roads that brought Europe wealth now brought its absolute extinction. With no natural immunity and a highly connected society, the plague didn't just kill a third of the population, it wiped out nearly 80%. The European continent didn't just collapse, it went entirely silent. Which brings us back to that blackened, half-melted crown sitting in the ashes of Rome. When we began, you might have thought that crown was destroyed by the fury of Mongol warriors. But now we know the terrifying truth. It wasn't melted by the fires of war. It was melted by the desperate, frantic survivors of a dying continent, trying to burn the plague out of the gold of a dead pope. The Mongol conquest didn't enslave Western Europe, it created a blank slate. A wild, forested wilderness where empires once stood, leaving the American continents completely undiscovered, and shifting the center of human civilization permanently to the east. If you want to see what happens when the remnants of this empty, forgotten Europe are finally rediscovered by a powerful, expanding Ottoman Empire, click the video on your screen now.